It starts with something so ordinary, so familiar, that most people would never imagine it could shake two nations. A family in Johannesburg walks into a small neighborhood grocery store looking for the same thing millions of Americans buy every week: chicken. It's simple, affordable, reliable. But on this morning, something feels different. Prices have shifted, shelves look unevenly stocked, and the conversations floating in the air are full of excitement, confusion, even celebration. Have you heard someone whispers? They finally did it. South Africa blocked American chicken. $450 million gone. We won. By noon that day, the rumor had spread far beyond that grocery store. Across farms, talk shows, WhatsApp groups, and community gatherings, people believed they were witnessing a historic moment. South Africa finally standing up to the United States after decades of frustration. Farmers cheered. Social media erupted. Commentators praised what they called a bold act of economic independence. But here is where the story turns. For all the noise, for all the celebration, for all the declarations of victory, not a single official from Pretoria or Washington confirmed anything at all. No statement, no press release, no policy document, just silence, deep, uncomfortable silence. And for people who have watched global politics for many years, you know this silence is never empty. It is either hiding a truth or exposing one. So what really happened? Did South Africa truly take a stand strong enough to shake American exporters, or did an entire nation celebrate a victory that never actually occurred? In today's investigation, we will slow things down, peel back the layers, and look beyond the social media noise to understand what sparked this viral moment and what it reveals about power trade and national survival. If you care about honest analysis, if you want stories the headlines often ignore, then stay with us. And before we continue, please subscribe, because truth, especially in times like these, deserves a home. When you look beyond that first wave of excitement, beyond the grocery store conversations, the farmers celebrating on dusty rural roads, and the talk show hosts praising a supposed national triumph, you begin to see a far older, deeper story. A story that did not begin in 2025, and certainly not with a viral rumor. It began decades earlier with something as mundane as a shipment label: frozen chicken parts, United States. For years, South African farmers noticed the same painful pattern repeat itself with clockwork precision. The moment American chicken landed in the country, prices plunged. Contracts dried up. Local wholesalers switched to cheaper imports. Farmers who had spent their entire lives working the land suddenly could not afford feed. Workers were sent home without pay. Families in rural communities prayed their farms would survive long enough to see the next season. And the reason behind this collapse was never a mystery. The American poultry industry is one of the most subsidized agricultural systems on Earth. Feed support energy advantages, long-standing industrial scale, and a massive domestic market allow U.S. producers to operate with costs far lower than almost any competitor. But what makes the situation unique, almost cruelly so, is American consumer behavior. Americans overwhelmingly prefer white breast meat. That means the legs, thighs, and wings, dark meat becomes surplus. Mountains of it. And since exporters cannot sell it domestically at high profit, they ship it abroad at extremely low prices. To global markets, these cuts are not sold. They are practically dumped. And Africa, especially South Africa, became one of the primary dumping grounds. Local farmers could not outrun this tide. Their feed costs were higher, electricity bills higher, labor costs higher, transport costs higher. And unlike many American giants, they lived without subsidies, without financial cushions, without billion-dollar safety nets. Every time cheap U.S. chicken arrived, local production appeared overpriced, even though it simply reflected true costs. Entire supply chains, feed mills, trucking companies, packaging centers felt the pressure. This wasn't just economics. It was survival. To prevent total collapse, the South African government stepped in using the tools allowed under international trade law. They introduced anti-dumping duties, raising the price of American chicken the moment it crossed the border. They imposed import quotas to limit how much could enter. They strengthened sanitary regulations, especially during bird flu outbreaks in the United States, when infected states were temporarily suspended from exporting. None of these actions were dramatic. None were meant to embarrass or punish. They were simply the only legal defenses available to a country trying to protect its farmers from a behemoth. For years, these measures quietly shaped the trade relationship. The United States complained, South Africa explained, negotiations shifted, but the reality remained the same: two nations locked in a slow, grinding struggle over a product most people never imagined could cause such turmoil. Then came early 2025, and something subtle but important changed. Multiple technical restrictions intersected at the same moment. Certain U.S. states were blocked because of fresh bird flu concerns. Import quotas were already tight. Customs inspections were more thorough than usual. Cold chain checks took longer. Shipments slowed down, appearing almost stuck. And to ordinary observers, especially to frustrated farmers, this looked like a sudden, decisive national move. It was as if all the years of half measures had finally evolved into one bold stroke. Nobody checked for official documents. Nobody waited for confirmation. After years of hardship, the public was ready for good news, any good news. And so a rumor, unsupported by a single government statement, transformed into a national truth. But behind that rumor was the real enduring conflict, a system where one country must export to survive and another must protect its farmers to remain whole. This is the heart of the chicken war. Not headlines, not rumors, but a long, exhausting struggle over fairness, survival, and sovereignty. The moment the rumor broke, the country reacted as though a long-awaited storm had finally passed. It wasn't just excitement, it was relief. For farmers who had spent years fighting against unfair competition, the rumor felt like a long-delayed acknowledgement of their suffering. Across rural roads in KwaZulu-Natal, men gathered outside feed stores shaking hands and declaring it a turning point. In the Eastern Cape, small family farms that had been on the verge of shutting down for months suddenly felt a surge of hope. Even in urban centers like Cape Town and Johannesburg, talk radio buzzed with callers praising what they believed was a powerful show of national strength. It didn't matter that no official had confirmed anything. Emotion can move faster than facts, and in this moment, emotion took the lead. On social media, videos spread like wildfire, clips of jubilant farmers' graphics claiming $450 million lost by U.S. exporters, and commentators declaring that South Africa had finally broken free from American pressure. Each post fueled the next, forming a digital echo chamber where speculation felt like evidence. The sheer volume of content created an illusion of certainty. If everyone was saying it, surely it must be true. This wave of enthusiasm built into a national crescendo. Local poultry associations, long weary of battling imports, publicly celebrated what they called a victory for sovereignty. Influencers framed the rumored ban as a historic act of economic independence. Some even compared it to liberation struggles of the past, suggesting that South Africa was finally breaking chains that had held its agricultural sector hostage. But behind the celebrations, something strange lingered: silence. Neither Pretoria nor Washington said a word. No confirmation, no denial, no clarification. For people who have lived through decades of political events, that silence was unsettling. Governments do not ignore major trade developments, especially ones widely reported to cost a global superpower nearly $500 million. The absence of a statement created a vacuum, a space where speculation grew, where theories multiplied, where imagination replaced information. In rural communities, the silence was interpreted as strategic. Many believed the government was preparing for a diplomatic confrontation, or perhaps intentionally keeping quiet to avoid political pressure. Farmers told each other, if they're not denying it, it means it's true. Hope became justification. But among economists and trade analysts, alarm bells rang. They knew how trade law worked. They knew that any official ban would require documentation, legal notices, and clear procedural steps, none of which had occurred. As experts began speaking publicly, the mood shifted. They explained that there had been no new policy, only long-standing restrictions intensifying simultaneously. They emphasized that the numbers circulating online, especially the alleged $450 million loss, had no verified source. Still, the corrections struggled to catch up. Once a narrative takes root in public imagination, the truth has to run uphill to catch it. Newsrooms hesitated. Few wanted to contradict a story that had captured national pride. Editors debated whether reporting the actual facts might spark backlash or appear unpatriotic. Meanwhile, online personalities doubled down, insisting that analysts were out of touch, that ordinary people know what's really happening. The tension grew as two realities collided: the emotional truth people wanted and the factual truth unfolding behind the scenes. Then came the reactions from international observers. Trade watchers abroad noted the trend with concern. Diplomats quietly reached out to Pretoria for clarification, unsure how to interpret the silence. American agricultural groups, more pragmatic than political, began reviewing their shipment data, trying to identify whether the supposed ban had any basis in reality. Their early findings revealed delays and restrictions, yes, but nothing resembling a total shutdown. This is where the story reached its true peak, an entire nation celebrating a victory that no one had officially declared, built on a misunderstanding that neither government rushed to correct. And yet this climax revealed something far more important than the rumor itself. It exposed the depth of frustration within South Africa's agricultural community, the desperation for protection, and the simmering belief that powerful nations do not play fair. It showed how quickly a population weary from years of economic strain could embrace a rumor when it aligned with their hopes. The celebration was real. The emotions were real. But the policy behind them was not. When the dust began to settle and the initial excitement faded, the country found itself confronting the quieter, more complicated consequences of believing in a victory that had never been officially announced. The first place these consequences showed themselves was not in parliament or in diplomatic circles, but in everyday homes and markets. Ordinary families who walked into supermarkets expecting a new era of cheaper local chicken instead found shelves still shifting, prices still adjusting, and supply still inconsistent. Confusion replaced celebration. People asked, if we won, why does everything look the same? In poorer communities, the emotional swing hit even harder. Many households already lived on tight margins, relying on inexpensive protein to stretch weekly meals. The temporary slowdown in imports, which helped fuel the rumor in the first place, pushed prices up, if only slightly. For families watching every coin, that small increase was enough to strain budgets. The irony was painful. A rumor meant to symbolize liberation ended up creating new anxieties for the very people it was supposed to uplift. Farmers, meanwhile, found themselves caught between renewed hope and harsh reality. For a brief moment, they believed they had finally gained the decisive protection they had begged for, protection that could stabilize their businesses, retain workers, and safeguard entire rural economies. But as experts clarified the situation and reality resurfaced, many felt betrayed, not necessarily by government action, but by government silence. The unspoken question lingered in farming communities. If they knew this wasn't real, why didn't they tell us sooner? That sense of betrayal quietly shifted into political pressure. Agricultural unions intensified their calls for real formal action against U.S. imports. Farmers attended town hall meetings in higher numbers, demanding ministers respond directly. Politicians who had previously avoided the poultry issue now used it as a platform, positioning themselves as defenders of local industry. The rumor had awakened something dormant, a collective memory of being overlooked. The political consequences did not stop there. Within South Africa's larger political landscape, the rumor exposed fractures in public trust. Citizens began questioning why government communications were so vague, why trade decisions seemed hidden behind layers of technical language, and why clarity arrived only after confusion had already spread. Opposition parties seized the moment, accusing the administration of incompetence or deliberate ambiguity. Government spokespeople struggled to explain that no announcement had been made because no policy had changed, an explanation that felt insufficient to many. Meanwhile, the media faced its own reckoning. Newsrooms debated their role in amplifying or correcting the narrative. Some journalists admitted privately that the allure of a David versus Goliath victory made them slower to question the claims. Others insisted that their caution was justified given the lack of official denial. The result was a moment of collective reflection. How easily can a nation be carried by the momentum of hope? The international arena also subtly shifted. Even without an official ban, the mere perception that South Africa had struck a blow against U.S. exporters caused diplomats and trade officers to step more carefully. Conversations became more cautious. Requests for clarification were made quietly. Allies and competitors alike observed how quickly public sentiment could flare, recognizing the political sensitivity of agricultural trade. Ultimately, the greatest consequence was psychological. The country realized how fragile the balance was between wanting sovereignty and needing stability, between fighting for farmers and protecting consumers, between resisting foreign pressure and managing international partnerships. The rumor had acted like a spark landing on dry grass, revealing just how combustible the national mood had become. And as citizens processed this emotional journey from hope to confusion to reflection, they were left with a lingering, uncomfortable question. If a rumor alone could shake the nation this much, what would happen when the real fight eventually comes? From the American side of this long dispute, the rumor that South Africa had finally blocked U.S. chicken was more than a headline. It was a direct challenge to an industry that depends on global markets for survival. In states like Arkansas, Georgia, and Alabama, where poultry farming is not just a business, but a way of life, exporters began examining their shipment logs with growing concern. They knew shipments were slowing, but they also knew there had been no official ban. The confusion troubled them because in trade, uncertainty is as damaging as restriction. A rumor strong enough to shape public perception in another country can by itself shift export strategies, investment decisions, and long-term planning. To U.S. agricultural groups, the bigger fear was precedent. If one major African nation could suddenly restrict imports even mistakenly, others might be encouraged to follow. The U.S. poultry industry has long leaned on African markets to absorb its surplus dark meat. Any hint that these markets might be tightening their doors made exporters uneasy. They did not panic, but they paid attention. They reached out to trade officials. They sent inquiries to embassies. Quiet conversations began in Washington about whether this was a misunderstanding, a warning, or the early sign of a new era in African trade policy. Diplomats took the matter seriously for another reason as well: AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. AGOA is not just a trade law, it is a geopolitical tool, a bridge between the U.S. and the African continent. Billions of dollars flow through it. Automotive exports, citrus, wine, metals, manufactured goods all benefit from its preferential access. Any perception that South Africa was pushing back against U.S. imports raised questions about whether AGOA itself might become strained. Washington does not want to jeopardize relationships with key African partners, especially at a time when global influence is shifting, and other powers, China, Russia, the Gulf states, are expanding their presence. Outside the U.S., other nations watched the rumor with a mix of curiosity and strategic interest. For emerging economies, South Africa's supposed defiance looked like a symbol of a growing global trend, countries becoming less tolerant of cheap imports that undermined local industries. Countries in West Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia have faced similar pressures. Many saw parallels in their own struggles with subsidized foreign goods. Even without confirmation, the rumor served as a case study in how quickly public sentiment can push governments into defensive postures on trade. For global economists, the moment revealed something more profound. It showed that the balance of power in international trade is shifting not just through official agreements but through public opinion, digital narratives, and national identity. A rumor that gained enough emotional momentum could send tremors across borders. It could change the tone of negotiations. It could force policymakers to rethink their strategies. And for Africa as a whole, the world's reaction offered a subtle but powerful affirmation: the continent is no longer a silent participant in global trade. It is a battleground for influence, a place where decisions echo far beyond its shores. Even a dispute over something as humble as chicken can reveal who has leverage, who has vulnerabilities, and who may be rewriting the rules. As the dust settled internationally, one thing became clear: the world was paying attention not because of what South Africa did, but because of what the rumor made people believe it might be capable of doing. As South Africa slowly stepped out of the shadow of the rumor, the nation was left with more questions than answers. Not questions about chicken or trade policy alone, but about how fragile public understanding can become when silence meets uncertainty. A story that began with a shipment delay evolved into a national celebration, then transformed again into a sobering reminder of how easily hope can outrun truth. And this is where the deeper warning lies, in a world where digital platforms can transform whispers into headlines. Within hours, nations must learn to guard not only their borders and their industries, but also their narratives. A misunderstanding powerful enough to move markets is powerful enough to destabilize diplomacy. A rumor embraced as victory can become disappointment when reality catches up. And when public belief becomes disconnected from policy, governments can be forced into decisions not by strategy, but by emotional pressure. South Africa is not alone in facing this new landscape. Across the African continent, stories like this are unfolding in different forms. Countries are wrestling with the delicate balance between sovereignty and global integration, between protecting local producers and navigating international partnerships. Many viewers, especially those who follow Africa news closely, may see echoes of this moment in the rise of leaders like President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, where economic self-determination and public expectation often collide in dramatic ways. These debates are no longer quiet. They are defining a new era for the continent. But this moment also holds a mirror up to the rest of us. For Americans watching from afar, especially those who have lived long enough to witness the cycles of politics, trade, and power, it becomes clear that the world is shifting. Influence is no longer guaranteed. Markets no longer move in one direction. And even a product as simple as chicken can reveal the tensions of a global order in transition. As South Africa and the United States prepare for the next chapter of this long dispute, one thing is certain: the chicken war is not ending. It will pause. It will reshape itself. It will quiet down, then rise again, because the forces driving it have not changed. One side must export, the other must protect. Everything else is negotiation. So the question now belongs to you. If South Africa must choose between preserving its farmers and preserving its trade privileges, which path should it take? And what would you want your own country to do if the roles were reversed? If you believe these conversations matter, if you feel you are among the few who want truth, not just headlines, please share this video. And subscribe if you want to be among the first to understand the global shifts shaping our world today.